What's up, YouTube people? It's your boy Patty McNinja, and I've actually not done a review in a minute now, but there was a video game release that I had circled on my metaphorical calendar for a while now, and that game, of course, is Metal Gear Solid Delta Snake Eater. Side note, I hate that they put Delta in there. It just makes the title unnecessarily long. I get the idea of them trying to distinguish between the original game and the remaster, but throwing in Delta just seems unnecessary. Everyone's just gonna call this the Snake Eater remake or just the remake. But I digress. Of course, since I'm making this video, I've played the game and I want to talk about it. So without further ado, let's rock. And I was super psyched for this game. Not only did I ask off from work the Thursday and Friday that this game was releasing, which to be honest with you, isn't that uncommon for me. It's actually become an ongoing joke between me and my coworkers. Anytime I'm off work, they always ask me, oh, what video game came out this week? So it's not uncommon for me to do that. But I was so excited for this game that I actually decided, since I was already going to be off work anyways, I might as well live stream this game as well. And I haven't live streamed anything in like 3 years. And that's how excited I was for this game. Which, side note, I had a blast streaming, so it's probably going to become a thing that I do more regularly on this channel. I don't think it's ever going to become what I used to do. I used to stream like 3 or 4 times a week pretty consistently. It's never going to be that, but it's definitely going to be something that I'm going to try to do more often, especially the games that I'm going to be playing all weekend to make these review videos. So if you're into that type of stuff, definitely, and if you haven't already, definitely consider subscribing and dinging that bell. And I'm sure I've shared this story on this channel before, so I'll make this short, but playing the first Metal Gear Solid game on my original PlayStation was like a religious experience for me. Up until that point, I'd really only played games like Mario and Donkey Kong and even Mortal Kombat, and those games are fine, but it felt like this game was on a completely different level. And the second Metal Gear game was fine. It was fun. I enjoyed it. But it wasn't until Snake Eater came out and I felt very similar. I had a very similar experience like I did with the first game, where it was just like, man, they are just operating on a completely different frequency than everybody else. And it just scratched an itch I didn't know I had. And I say all of that, and I share that story just to say that while I try my hardest to be objective any video game that I review on this channel, it was very difficult for me to be objective about this particular game because I wanted to love this game so much. This game gave me exactly what I wanted from a remake of Snake Eater. But if I'm being objective, it did kind of feel more like a remaster than a remake. And what I mean by that is, even though I know that they started from essentially scratch with this remake, it has more of a remaster feel to it. They didn't really, at the end of the day, change that much about this game. However, I don't really blame them. I know that Kojima didn't actually have anything to do with this remake, but you're still remaking a game that he created, so there's still the spirit of Kojima in this game. And what I love about his games, and why I've been essentially a lifelong fan since I played the original Metal Gear Solid game, is he's never gonna give you a cut and paste video game. He is always gonna do whatever he can to push the envelope. And it feels like Snake Eater was so ahead of its time that you don't really have to do a ton to make it a 2025 video game. There's some slight quality of life improvements with the gameplay, which we'll get into here in a little bit. I actually think that they could have done a little bit more in that sense, but overall I was pretty pleased with that. But most of the gameplay is exactly the same, and the story is beat for beat exactly the same. And that's okay, because that's what I wanted from this game. I didn't expect a start from scratch, completely overhauled remake of Snake Eater. Because the first game was so good, you just didn't need to do that. All right, so getting into the specifics, I already kind of mentioned the story, so we'll just start there. And we'll be fairly quick with this just because, like I already said, it's basically beat for beat the exact same story from the original game. Now, it has been a minute since I played the original game, and I've only played it a couple of times, so I'd love to hear your opinions in the comments down below. Was there something that I just didn't catch that they changed from the original game? Let me know in the comments down below. But for my money, it was literally line for line the exact same story from the original game, and for the most part I totally get it. It's such a cool story. It's over the top, it's goofy, it has a very like James Bond spy thriller aspect to it that I absolutely loved. I ate all of that shit right up. There are so many double and triple crosses that'll make your head spin. That being said, if you've never played a Metal Gear Solid game before, brace yourself. The cutscenes are going to be very long. I don't know if it's this game, and again, correct me in the comments down below if I'm misremembering it, but I believe Metal Gear Solid, the franchise, has the record for the longest cutscene in video game history. So brace yourself. These cutscenes are going to be very long. They're going to be very exposition and monologue heavy. Even after some of the cutscenes, there's a long codex conversation, especially at the beginning of the game, that may rub new players the wrong way. But I expected it. I enjoy these types of games. I mean, I'm still playing Kojima games to this day. Literally, I finished this game on Saturday, and I'm slowly still making my way through Death Stranding 2. So Sunday, that's basically all I did on Sunday was play Death Stranding 2. So obviously I'm a big fan of the way that he makes video games and tells stories. But even I forgot how long some of these cutscenes are. I think if you watch my stream on Saturday towards the end of the game, I was getting a little annoyed, especially at the very end. I mean, you basically have your last boss battle and it's still like 45 minutes to an hour where you're just sitting there listening to a character monologue. So just brace yourself. But overall, I really dug the story like I did with the original game because it's beat for beat the exact same story. Now, there was two small nitpicks that are far from deal breakers. I just want to be clear. I love video games, of course, but I also love movies and TV. I just love stories in general. And one thing, as I've gotten older, has become a pretty big pet peeve of mine is I understand that exposition is required when you're telling a story. You have to give your audience information, but there's ways to feed us exposition that doesn't feel forced. One of my biggest pet peeves is when exposition doesn't feel natural. And the best example I could give of this is like if you have two scientists having a conversation and they're explaining science to each other, they don't need to do that. That is only in service of the audience because scientists would know science, so they wouldn't need to explain science to each other. So that feels unnatural. There's several moments in this game where there's supposed to be these ultra elite spies. And if these types of people exist, I'd imagine they keep everything super close to their vest. They don't share anything. That's literally the nature of their job, is to not share information. And they go on such long monologues and tell each other everything in this game. And I get some of that is just the James Bond villain, I'm gonna tell you my plan before I'm about to, what I think, kill you. I get that this is kind of their take on the James Bond spy thriller. So a lot of that I kind of just ignore. That's fine. But especially towards the end of this game, there is literally a character that just flat out tells the plot of the game from that character's perspective. And I'm just like, this conversation would not happen. It just wouldn't. I know that they try to justify it a little bit. And for the most part, if we're being honest, you're suspending your belief a lot during this game, obviously. You're literally fighting a guy that can control bees. You have another fight with a super old sniper that gets energy from the sun like a fucking flower. So obviously you're suspending your belief. So this is not a deal breaker by any means whatsoever, but it's just something that kind of rubbed me the wrong way, that it just doesn't really make sense they'd be having some of these conversations. Another thing that kind of rubbed me the wrong way is Eva and Snake's kind of will they, won't they sexual chemistry in this game. Call this a boomer take if you want. I'm technically not a boomer, but I get that this is kind of an old man take. When I played the original Metal Gear game, finding the bikini model posters in the locker or whatever, it felt funny. It felt like I was a little kid getting away with something that I knew I shouldn't be doing because my parents weren't going to ever play this video game. So it felt like I was getting away with something. And when the original Snake Eater game came out, I was in college. So I probably just ignored it and I probably just chalked it up as being funny. But now that I'm almost 40 and I recognize that other grown-ups made this game, it just really comes off as cringy. A lot of their relationship did not age well in my opinion. Again, neither one of these are deal breakers by any means. I just thought I would bring them up. So moving on to the gameplay, much like the story, the gameplay is pretty much exactly the original game. And honestly, I think of remakes very similar to how I feel about sequels, especially if I played the original game. If I'm playing your sequel or your remake, it's because I liked the first game. Give me more of what worked in that first game, improve upon what you can improve upon. And again, Snake Eater was so ahead of its time, they didn't really need to improve upon a ton. I do feel like, based on some of the visual stuff that we'll get to later, and some of the subtle improvements on the gameplay, I do feel like this is the definitive way to play this game. But there wasn't massive changes to the gameplay. They did a lot of subtle things where I think this game just plays a lot smoother now than the original game. And maybe it's just the top-down old style camera of the original. It just felt like Snake moved unnatural. He just kind of had a clunky way of moving. Anytime that you wanted to crouch or lay on the ground, it felt like they were very segmented. They were very separate actions. They weren't just one smooth action. And I think that they kind of smoothed out the edges in the remake. Everything just kind of flows a lot more naturally. Snake moves around much more natural in this game than he did in the original game. When you get down on your belly, it just feels like it's one smooth action instead of three different things that you were doing. The transition between sneaking up on an enemy and going into CQC felt like stitched together in the original game. In this game, again, I keep saying the word smooth, but that's the best way I can think to describe it. The transition between sneaking up to an enemy and going into CQC, that animation just feels smooth. There's quality of life improvements, most notably changing your camo and accessing the codecs, having those conversations. You no longer have to navigate the menu to get to them, which I think is great, especially with the camo, because you're going to be constantly changing your camo depending on what environment you're in. And the camo index really matters in this game. So I love that you can just access that from the D-pad now and you don't actually have to get into the menu. Now, on the flip side of that, you still do have to feed yourself and heal yourself in the menu, so you can't get away from that. But honestly, I kind of like that you still have to get into the menu. I'm a bit of a like frog and reptile and snake nerd, and so I kind of just like looking at them in the menu, so that was kind of fun. And it just makes sense that you have to heal yourself in the menu, and I also just think it looks kind of cool, like the x-rays, and I like that you can have the checklist right there so you never really forget what you have to do to heal yourself. I do kind of want to make a note that, and this is how I just play video games in general, if a game gives me a choice to change my difficulty level, I'm always just going to play in the default difficulty level. Whatever the game wants me to play in, that's what I'm going to play in. Now, if I replay the game, which I will most definitely replay this game, and I decide to play in a higher difficulty, that's when I would do it. But my first playthrough is always going to be the default difficulty. And in this game, and maybe it's just my playstyle, I went with a very passive playstyle, which, side note, I love that this game gives you incentive to play passive, not just with capturing animals, because you'll capture them if you trank the animals. You can capture them in the cage and they won't spoil. Eventually you will kill them because you're eating them, but the game rewards you for passively capturing these animals. And there's a particular boss battle, not to spoil anything, but there's a particular boss battle that is way easier if you haven't killed everybody in the game. So I definitely played more passive, so I didn't get in very many firefights, so obviously I didn't have to heal myself as much. But it did feel like the healing materials never ran out. Like I always had exactly what I needed to heal myself. I don't think I ever fell below half of what I could carry of anything as far as the healing was concerned. There's even a moment later in the game where Eva gets hurt and they literally say to you, you can heal her, but you still have a mission to accomplish. And if it comes down to healing yourself or healing Eva, you need to pick yourself. And I was like, no problem, because I have so much stuff to go around. Like, I was never worried about healing myself at all. Side note, that particular section was probably my least favorite of the game because Eva's AI was so dumb. They even say to you at the beginning of that moment that she will just follow you and that she'll just do whatever you do. If you kneel down or you lay on your belly, she's going to do exactly what you do. Except for if you get 5 steps ahead of her, she'll just stop. She complains about being hungry every 20 seconds. That whole section was my least favorite part of the game, and it's probably only about 10 minutes, so obviously I really enjoyed this game. But yeah, it was super annoying because her AI was really dumb. Speaking of AI, the enemy AI for the most part I do think is slightly smarter in this game versus the original game, but they're still pretty dumb. But that's stealth in video games. I still don't think we've quite mastered enemy AI in stealth games. I just don't think we're quite there yet. If you're slightly paying attention to your camo index and you're laying on your belly, you're practically invisible, especially if you're in tall grass. Unless they step on you, they're not gonna see you. It does feel like they're a little bit better about movement and noise in this game versus the original, but they're still pretty dumb. The one area that I felt like definitely could have been improved upon, and they, to their credit, tried to improve upon it, and it just flat out did not work for me, is the cover system. I didn't really like the cover system in the original game. I absolutely fucking hate it in this game. So basically they tried to streamline the cover system where you didn't actually have to like engage with the cover and like push a button to go into cover. All you basically have to do in this game is just walk up and just kind of walk up against a thing, and then you would go into cover, which makes sense in theory. But in practice, what happened was anytime I would walk anywhere close to something, it would stick me to the back of that thing and I would be in cover when I didn't actually want to be in cover, and it was pretty fucking annoying. Before we talk about the visuals of this remake, I do want to mention, as you do in the original game, there are boss battles, and the boss battles are exactly the same. Again, I've played this game a couple of times already. I played the original game a couple of times already, so I knew for the most part what I was supposed to do. But even if you're brand new to this franchise, I think as long as you're paying attention to what the game is telling you, these boss battles are very easy. Other than 3, I think, I beat every single boss the first time I tried it. I think the only bosses that I struggled at all with is the Sorrow boss fight, just because even though that's not really a fight per se, I just couldn't remember what the thing was. I knew that there was a thing at the end that I was supposed to do, but I couldn't remember what it was, so I had to try that a couple of times, which again, that's not really a fight per se. It's just kind of a slog to get through it. The Volgan fight, and what I mean by that is just his hand-to-hand combat fight, took a couple of tries, and then the boss fight, the boss fight, took a couple of tries. But once I realized I had forgotten something about CQC, that fight got way easier. So I wouldn't stress too much about the boss battles because they're pretty easy in this game. Now, as far as the visuals, it's just a really nice, fresh coat of paint. Like I've been saying this entire time, the original game, like the franchise as a whole, was a way ahead of its time in pretty much every aspect, but also in the art style. So they didn't actually have to do a ton as far as like changing the character models or anything like that. They just really kind of had to make it more modern looking. This game looks amazing in Unreal Engine 5. Not that I am the expert in hair by any means, but I do think video games have come a long way with rendering realistic looking hair in video games, and I think that this game knocks it out of the park. The hair looks amazing in this game. The detail in the jungle looks incredible. I love the animal character models in this game. I love the detail. Like I said, I love like frogs and snakes and reptiles, and there's a lot of cool detail with these animals in this game that I thought was amazing. Now, some of that detail gets lost later in the game when you have to go through these like different buildings and these research labs and these bases, it does kind of lose that life a little bit. But I do want to give them the benefit of the doubt because it does make sense. These are military personnel. They aren't on vacation, so they're not going to like decorate these bases or anything that you're going through. It's just, I like when things feel lived in, and these buildings don't really feel lived in. But again, it makes sense because they're on a mission, they're not on vacation. But some of that detail kind of gets washed out in the buildings, and you don't see as much of that versus the jungle sections. I love how detailed the video games are getting in 2025. When Snake walks through mud, he gets muddy, but only the sections that walk through the mud is what gets muddy. I think that's awesome. When Snake gets hurt, even after he heals himself, you're gonna still see the evidence of that wound. For example, if he gets shot and then he heals himself, he's gonna have a bullet wound for the rest of the game. And I just think the updated visuals just enhances the already amazing voice performances in this game. Like I've been saying this entire time, this franchise as a whole really was ahead of its time in a lot of areas, but especially with the voice cast. I doubt this is technically the first game I ever played, the original Metal Gear Solid 1. I don't think it was the first game I ever played that had like a real voice cast, but they went above and beyond. And I think the updated visuals really make those voice performances pop even more than they did in the original game. I love the music of this game. There's especially an intro. It feels very James Bondy, where they're crediting all the original team like Kojima, rightfully so. And that theme song is amazing, and that intro in general is awesome. Now, for any of you that love the original game and love the look of the original game, there is a legacy mode that you can switch to that kind of gives you that top-down camera angle and gives you the controls of the original game. So if that's how you want to play this game, go for it. I love that this game gives you that option. There's also a really cool photo mode that I'm really excited to see other people participate in. I'm not a huge photo mode guy, so I probably won't partake in it myself, but people that are way better at photo modes than me, I'm definitely looking forward to seeing what they can come up with. I should point out, even though, again, as I've said in my past reviews, I'm not much of a 60 frames per second kind of guy, it doesn't really bug me if a game drops to 58 frames per second instead of 60. However, I have seen a lot of people complain about the performance of this game. I personally didn't really have much of an issue. There was maybe one time that I can think of where I dropped a few frames and I actually noticed it. So that was probably bad if I'm noticing it, because I'm not the guy that usually pays too much attention to that. For the most part, I do think that this game looks and runs great. I just wanted to point out that I have seen a few people complain about frames per second with this game. I played it on my base PlayStation 5 and I didn't really have that many issues outside of maybe one. All right, so wrapping up this video, while this game isn't your start from scratch type of remake, it definitely feels much more like a remaster, just because Snake Eater, the original game, was so ahead of its time that they just didn't need to do as much to change up this game. Maybe that rubs a few people the wrong way, especially considering the $70 price tag. However, that's exactly what I wanted from this remake. I wanted to have an excuse to play an updated version of this game, and that's exactly what this remake is. It gave me what was amazing about the first game: the wild, over-the-top spy thriller story, great stealth gameplay with a fresh coat of paint. That's all I could ever ask for from this remake. It's not a perfect game by any means. There was a few things that I thought could have been fine-tuned a little bit more, but I really enjoyed this game. I'm looking forward to replaying it when I eventually get done with Death Stranding 2. So I think I'm going to give it 4 out of 5 stars. But as always, those are just my thoughts on Metal Gear Solid Delta Snake Eater. I'd love to hear yours in the comments down below. Of course, I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, do me a huge favor and smash that like button, as the kids say. It's just a quick and easy way to tell YouTube that you enjoyed this content, and they should push it to other people that might enjoy it as well. If you especially enjoyed this video, which I assume that you did because you made it this far in the video, and you haven't already, definitely consider subscribing. If you do subscribe, ding that bell. That way you're notified every time I post another video. I try to post weekly gaming related content, and as I said earlier, I'm probably going to be live streaming a lot more frequently. So I doubt that I'm going to be waiting 3 more years to live stream again. I'm planning currently to be live streaming later on this week. So if you want to be notified when I either post a video or go live, definitely make sure you're subscribed and ding that bell. But until next video or live stream, take it easy. What's up, YouTube people? It's your boy Patty McNinja, and this is my boy Yoshi, aka Kitty Boy. And we were just talking, and we agree that since you made it this far in the video, you might as well subscribe. You wouldn't want to disappoint Kitty Boy, would you?